The sound of metal handcuffs clicking shut echoed through our quiet suburban neighborhood. My 12-year-old son, Ethan, stood trembling in tears as the police officer restrained him in front of our neighbors. His backpack lay scattered on the ground, homework papers blowing across the perfectly manicured lawn. Standing beside them with arms crossed and a smug smile was Karen Wilson, our HOA president, pointing an accusatory finger at my terrified child. "This is what happens when you don't follow our rules," she announced loudly, making sure everyone could hear. Little did she know, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. My name is Michael Reynolds, and for the past 8 years I've served as the district attorney for Westlake County. I've prosecuted everything from petty theft to homicide, always fighting for justice in a system that sometimes seems designed to deny it. But nothing in my career prepared me for the battle I was about to face in my own neighborhood. 3 months ago, my wife Sarah and I decided to move to Oak Ridge Estates, an upscale community with excellent schools and beautiful parks. After years of working long hours, I wanted Ethan to have the childhood he deserved, safe streets to ride his bike, good friends nearby, and a sense of community. The pristine lawns and friendly neighbors seemed perfect when we toured the neighborhood. The HOA fees were steep, but we thought it was worth it for the amenities and well-maintained common areas. What the realtor conveniently failed to mention was that Oak Ridge Estates HOA was ruled with an iron fist by Karen Wilson, a former corporate executive who treated the neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. In her mid-50s, with an immaculate bob haircut and perpetually pursed lips, Karen had been president for 7 consecutive terms. No one dared run against her anymore. Our troubles began just 2 weeks after moving in. The first violation notice appeared on our door. Our grass was apparently half an inch too tall. Then came warnings about our trash cans being visible from the street for 30 minutes after collection. Sarah's potted plants on the porch were non-approved vegetation. Each notice included a fine and a passive-aggressive reminder about maintaining community standards. I tried to be reasonable, attending HOA meetings and following the labyrinthine rule book we'd been given. But the violations continued, each more ridiculous than the last. When I questioned them at a meeting, Karen simply smiled thinly and said, "Perhaps Oak Ridge isn't the right fit for everyone, Mr. Reynolds." The situation escalated when Ethan, walking home from school one afternoon, cut across a small strip of grass between 2 houses. It was a common shortcut all the neighborhood kids used, shaving 5 minutes off their walk. But this particular patch belonged to Karen's close friend and HOA board member, Patricia. That evening, we received an emergency violation notice with a $150 fine for unauthorized access and damage to private property. When I called to explain it was just a child walking home, Karen coldly informed me that proper sidewalk use was outlined in Section 27B of the HOA guidelines, and children must be properly supervised at all times. I paid the fine to avoid conflict, but warned Ethan to take the long way home, even though it added 15 minutes to his walk. Just until things cooled down, I promised him, hating the look of confusion on his face as he tried to understand what he'd done wrong. The following Tuesday, I was in the middle of preparing for a major case when my phone rang. It was Sarah, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Michael, you need to come home now. The police are here. They've detained Ethan." I broke every speed limit driving home, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. When I screeched into our driveway, the scene that greeted me was surreal. A police cruiser with flashing lights, neighbors peering from behind curtains, and my son in handcuffs while Karen stood nearby with several HOA board members. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, rushing toward Ethan. The officer, young and clearly uncomfortable, stepped forward. "Sir, we received a call about a juvenile trespassing and making threats. We're required to respond to all calls." "He's 12, I shouted, then forced myself to lower my voice when I saw Ethan flinch. "Officer, can you please remove those handcuffs? He's a child, not a criminal." Karen stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Reynolds, Your son was explicitly warned about cutting through private property. Today, he not only trespassed again, but became belligerent when Patricia confronted him. Ethan, tears streaming down his face, shook his head frantically. Dad, I didn't. I was just walking on the sidewalk past her house, and she started yelling at me. I told her I wasn't on her grass, and she said I was being disrespectful. Patricia, a thin woman with a permanent scowl, huffed indignantly. He threatened me, said his father wouldn't take care of me if I reported him again. I felt unsafe in my own home. The absurdity of a grown woman claiming to feel threatened by a skinny 12-year-old boy might have been laughable if the situation weren't so serious. I turned to the officer, my attorney instincts kicking in. Officer, do you have any evidence of these alleged threats? Any witnesses besides the complainant? Any reason to believe a child walking home from school constitutes an imminent danger? The officer shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we're just responding to the call as required. After 20 tense minutes and several phone calls to the police station, the officer finally removed Ethan's handcuffs and issued only a warning. As they drove away, Karen approached with a fresh violation notice. This is a $500 fine for threatening behavior and disrupting community peace, she said, thrusting the paper at me. The board will also be meeting to discuss whether your family is a good fit for Oak Ridge. Perhaps a rental property would be more appropriate for your lifestyle. That night, after finally getting Ethan to sleep, no small feat given his anxiety about the day's events, Sarah and I sat at our kitchen table, shell-shocked. They humiliated our son in front of the entire neighborhood, Sarah whispered, tears in her eyes. He's afraid to go to school tomorrow, says everyone will think he's a criminal. I stared at the growing stack of HOA violations, my anger crystallizing into resolve. This isn't just about petty rules anymore. They're using their power to intimidate and control everyone in this neighborhood, and they picked the wrong family to bully. The next morning, we received an email from the HOA board announcing an emergency community meeting to discuss recent incidents of juvenile delinquency and parental negligence. They didn't name us explicitly, but everyone would know who they meant. That's it, I said, setting down my coffee cup with such force that it cracked. They want a fight? I'll give them a war. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at the community center. Sarah wanted to skip it, fearing more public humiliation, but I insisted we face them head-on. What we didn't expect was for Ethan to overhear our conversation. I want to go too, he said from the doorway, his voice small but determined. It's about me, right? I should be there. My instinct was to protect him from more trauma, but I recognized the look in his eyes, the same one I'd seen in the mirror that morning. He needed to reclaim his dignity. The community center was packed when we arrived. Karen and the board sat at a long table at the front, looking like judges presiding over a trial. Whispers followed us as we found seats in the back row. I noticed several neighbors avoided eye contact, while others gave us sympathetic glances. Karen called the meeting to order with a sharp rap of her gavel. We're here tonight to address growing concerns about community safety and parental supervision, she began, not even attempting to disguise her target. Recent incidents have demonstrated that some residents may not share our community values. For the next 20 minutes, she and Patricia outlined a series of new security measures, including restrictions on when children could be outside unsupervised, mandatory background checks for new residents, and increased fines for rule violations. With each proposed measure, they would glance meaningfully in our direction. Then Karen delivered the final blow. The board has also voted to recommend eviction proceedings against residents who demonstrate repeated inability to comply with our standards. While we cannot name specific households due to privacy concerns, we believe this sends a clear message about the type of community we intend to maintain. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me, his face flushing with shame. A few seats away, I noticed a classmate of his whispering to his mother while pointing in our direction. That was the moment something broke inside me. I stood up slowly. I'd like to address the board, please. Karen smiled thinly. The public comment period will be at the end of the meeting, Mr. Reynolds. Please take your seat. Actually, I said, moving toward the front of the room. As a homeowner in good standing, I have the right to speak at any community meeting. It's in your own bylaws. Section 4, paragraph 3. I've studied them quite thoroughly recently. Her smile faltered as I reached the front and turned to face the crowd. My name is Michael Reynolds. 3 months ago, my family moved here believing we'd found a community where our son could thrive. Instead, we've experienced harassment, intimidation, and witnessed our child being handcuffed for the crime of walking home from school. I looked directly at Ethan as I continued, wanting him to hear this most of all. Yesterday, my 12-year-old son was publicly humiliated and treated like a criminal. Last night, he asked me if we could move because he's afraid to walk in his own neighborhood. He asked what he did wrong to make everyone hate him. Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A woman in the front row wiped away a tear. I want to ask all of you, is this the community you want to live in, where children are afraid, where neighbors spy on neighbors, where a select few use their power to bully and intimidate anyone who doesn't fit their perfect mold? Karen stood up, face flushed with anger. That's enough. You're out of order. I ignored her. My son didn't do anything wrong. He's a good kid who just wanted to walk home from school. And yet, he was treated like a criminal because it gave certain people a sense of power. Looking directly at Ethan, whose eyes were wide with surprise, I said, "Son, you did nothing wrong, and I promise you, this ends today." For the next week, I worked late into the night after putting Ethan to bed. I requested copies of all HOA financial records, bylaws, meeting minutes, and enforcement actions for the past 5 years. As a lawyer, I knew exactly what to look for, and what I found was even worse than I'd suspected. The HOA had been selectively enforcing rules, targeting certain homeowners while ignoring violations by board members and their friends. Financial records showed questionable expenditures and potential misappropriation of funds. Most damning of all, I discovered that many of their rules had never been properly voted on or documented as required by state law. I also put up flyers inviting neighbors to a community meeting at our house to discuss concerns about HOA governance. Karen immediately sent a violation notice for unauthorized signage, but I left them up anyway. To my surprise, over 30 neighbors showed up. One by one, they shared their stories. Elderly residents fined for medical equipment visible from the street, a single mother threatened with eviction when chemotherapy made it impossible for her to maintain her lawn, a family of color who faced violations no one else received. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Armed with evidence and witness statements, I filed formal complaints with the State Housing Authority and the District Attorney's Office, recusing myself from the case, of course, but ensuring it landed on the desk of my most thorough colleague. I also filed a civil rights lawsuit against the HOA board members personally, not just the association. 3 days later, I received notice of an emergency HOA board meeting. When Sarah, Ethan, and I arrived, Karen looked pale and tense. The community center was packed, with people standing along the walls. Karen called the meeting to order with a shaking hand. We've called this meeting to address some concerns that have been raised about HOA governance. Before we begin, our attorney has advised us to make a statement. She unfolded a paper and read in a monotone voice. The board acknowledges that certain procedures may not have been followed properly. We are committed to reviewing all policies and ensuring compliance with state law moving forward. A neighbor stood up. That's it? After years of bullying and illegal fines, that's all you have to say? Another joined in. My mother was in tears when you fined her for having a wheelchair ramp. She paid you thousands she couldn't afford. The room erupted in angry voices as years of resentment poured out. Karen banged her gavel desperately, but no one paid attention. Finally, she shouted over the noise, "You don't understand the pressure. We're trying to maintain property values, Mr. Reynolds, you're an attorney. Surely you understand we were just trying to protect our community." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to me. I stood slowly. Actually, Miss Wilson, I'm not just an attorney. I'm the district attorney for Westlake County. The color drained from Karen's face as whispers rippled through the crowd. This was clearly news to her. And while I've recused myself from any official investigation into this HOA, I can tell you that selective enforcement of rules based on personal bias isn't just unethical. In many cases, it's illegal. As is financial mismanagement of HOA funds, which my colleague is currently investigating. Patricia leaned over to whisper urgently in Karen's ear. The board members exchanged panicked glances. "This meeting is adjourned," Karen announced, gathering her papers hastily. "Actually," I replied calmly, "according to your bylaws, a meeting can only be adjourned by majority vote, and I believe we have some elections to hold." The state investigation into the HOA's practices took 3 months, resulting in Karen and 3 board members being removed and fined $25,000 each for misappropriation of funds. The civil rights lawsuit was settled out of court, with the former board members paying restitution to affected families. A new HOA board was elected, with representation from all parts of the community. Their first act was to simplify the rulebook from 87 pages to 12, focusing on genuine community needs rather than control. As for Ethan, the experience had a surprisingly positive outcome. Once the truth came out, his classmates saw him not as a troublemaker, but as someone who stood up to bullies. He made new friends and started a student council initiative to create walking school buses, supervised groups of kids walking to school together along safe routes. One sunny Saturday, as we were planting a community garden in what used to be Karen's ornamentals only display area, Patricia approached hesitantly. She'd been the only board member to avoid financial penalties by cooperating with investigators. "Mr. Reynolds," she said quietly, "I want to apologize, especially to your son. I got caught up in Karen's way of thinking and lost sight of what community really means." I looked at Ethan, letting him decide how to respond. He considered for a moment, then handed her a trowel. "We're planting tomatoes on this side. You can help if you want." As Patricia kneeled awkwardly in the dirt beside my son, I caught Sarah's eye and smiled. Sometimes justice comes in unexpected ways. Later that evening, as we walked home past what used to be the no children allowed section of the neighborhood, now transformed into a bustling playground, Karen drove past in her moving truck. She'd sold her house well below market value, unable to face her neighbors after the truth came out. She slowed down, looking like she might say something, but I just smiled and waved. Next time, I called out pleasantly, "Make sure you know who you're dealing with." Justice doesn't always come easily, but standing up for what's right is always worth the fight. Our neighborhood is now truly a community, one where rules exist to help people, not control them. Have you ever faced a situation where someone abused their power? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else facing a similar battle. If you enjoyed this story of justice served and community restored, don't forget to subscribe for more real-life accounts of standing up to bullies and fighting for what's right. Hit that notification bell to make sure you never miss an upload. Remember, sometimes the most important battles are fought right in your own backyard.